I'm Dr. Amber Howard. I am in the College of Education. I teach elementary education courses. So I have a unique position because I'm the Dean's Fellow for Competency Based Learning. And Dr. Turner invited me to talk to you a little bit about what in the world is competency based learning. So Ferreira and McTighe talk about assessment should serve learning and it has multiple measures to provide evidence. There's clear learning goals. Assessment should be fair. All of that is part of competency-based education. So the things you're learning are really at the core of competency-based education. So you can take what you're learning and apply it to CBL. A big component of what McTighe talks about is backwards design. And he talks about that in a lot of his other work as well. And the thing with backwards design is when you design assessment, you begin with the end in mind. And typically, what that means for a teacher is they look at the state standard, they think about what that state standard says a student is supposed to do, and then they make an assessment, and then they plan the instruction that would help the student meet that goal. That's what backwards design is, and that's the foundation of assessment planning. Competency based learning approaches that in a really similar way. They just do it slightly differently because the standard is a little different. Instead of a standard, the teacher thinks deeper about what the standard actually means. So, a standard defines what a student should know and be able to do, such as measuring perimeter and area. A competency describes how the student applies and transfers that knowledge to a real situation in the world, such as building a garden. So instead of measuring students' understanding of perimeter and area, teachers are measuring whether they can actually apply that skill. Can they build a garden using that skill? So, in making that shift to focusing on assessing competency, we are bringing so much richness into our classrooms. And this work is happening all across the state of Missouri in really exciting ways. And I'll give you some examples in just a second. Some ways that this brings that richness into the classroom is it makes learning so much more relevant for students because teachers have to establish the why for the learning. Anytime that we can explain to students why they need to know this, their engagement goes up. And that creates a more active learning environment. And it also helps students develop autonomy and they feel a lot more empowered in their learning because they're applying their learning to the real world and teachers are holding them to these high expectations because they're having to really solve problems that they could actually solve in their lives someday. So, what does this actually look like in the real world? I know a lot of you in the class, probably all of you are secondary students, and I live in the elementary world. So, I'm going to give you some elementary examples that you can extrapolate to what that could look like in secondary, and I'll give you some examples of what's happening in the state at the secondary level. So I taught in the K-12 world for 12 years before moving into higher education. And for a lot of those years, I integrated standards across all content areas to teach fourth grade using project based learning. Project based learning is a great way to approach competency based learning. And it's funny when you think of the acronyms, PBL is a way to approach CBL. Education is a world of acronyms, and you'll learn that eventually once you really get in there. So, some of the culminating events that were part of my PBL units to showcase that rigor and student autonomy and kind of the real world learning that I was just talking about included a mock clinic where my students diagnosed and created treatment plans for patients that were part of the Missouri State PA program. They also developed a vacation package for clients based on their vacation desires and a budget that they came up with. Then the clients came in and they presented infomercials to these clients, and the clients chose what vacation package to go on. In another unit, students learned about how different elements of culture from around the world were slowly disappearing. And so students created documentaries to showcase those different elements of culture and how they were disappearing. And we showed those documentaries at the Moxie Theater downtown to students in the film studies program at Missouri State who critiqued them and offered feedback to students. Through my time in elementary schools, we created businesses, we built gardens, we persuaded community members to donate to various organizations. We did fundraisers. We had all kinds of community events that brought the community together with our school to embed these competency based learning elements with what we were doing to teach the standards. At the high school level across the state, some of the things that are happening is apprenticeship programs, and I know Dr. Turner knows a lot about those. So instead of traditional classroom credits, students are offered an apprenticeship to meet the same standards that they would in a traditional classroom. There's also internships and dual credit and all kinds of different ways to get a market value asset. And then there's also a lot of districts are creating a portrait of a graduate to where instead of showcasing that you've met all of the end of course exams, you have to showcase that you've met what the profile of a graduate looks like for that district. And so they work with community members to say, this is what we're looking for in our community. And we want our graduates to have these skills. And they have to create a portfolio to showcase, I've met these skills for the community. So when I talk about competency based learning to people, especially for my own students, they like the idea, but they have trouble kind of making the shift in their mindset. So I always give them this scenario, and this may help your students. I ask them, how do you know when you're doing well in a class? And they always list these things. They usually respond with saying, I do all my assignments, I read the textbook, I've gotten A's on all of my work, I have a 93% in the class, I show up to class, all of those things. And then I ask them, who decided that that's how you measure success in the class? And at that point, usually their brains visibly explode. And the teacher, and they tell them like, oh my gosh, the teacher told me that that's how I measure success. They never tell me, I know I'm doing well in the class because I'm learning something. They never say, oh, I'm able to take what I learned in this class and I'm applying it in this way. They can't tell me that they've self assessed and they've deeply learned this in some way. And that's where the traditional grading system has failed humans in general because we're seeking that validation from a source outside of ourselves. We want the teacher to tell us that we're doing well. And competency based learning seeks to shift that to an internal validation system where the student actually wants to learn something because they see that they need to learn it, because they see there's a real problem that they need to solve and they want to solve that problem. So that's like a 30,000-foot view of competency based learning. But that kind of helps students make the shift towards, okay, I get it. I want my students to have that internal motivation to learn. And CBL is one way that we can push students towards